Hello everyone, this is Ryan King and welcome to the 7th Blender art critique video on my channel. So how my art critiques work is at the end of the month, so like the last couple of days of the month, people can submit their artwork to be critiqued. Now you can submit your artwork anytime that you want, but it's best if you submit your artwork at the end of the month because then you won't have to wait as long for the critique video. So people submit their artwork at the end of the month, somewhere within like the last couple of days, and then at the first of the month, I go through all the submissions and I figure out which ones I want to critique. And then I make the art critique video as soon as I can after the starting of the month. And if you'd like to submit your artwork to be critiqued, you can submit it through the Google form. I'll leave the link in the video description. Now, this art critique video has been a little late, and I do apologize for that. If you go over to the community tab on my YouTube channel, I made this post, and I'm not actually sure if the community tab notifies people, so I'm not quite sure if everyone saw this, but basically I've been having a lot of digital eye strain, so when I just spend a little bit of time on the computer, my eyes get pretty strained. So I saw an eye doctor, and they figured out that I actually am slightly farsighted. So I can see everything clearly, but my eyes just work a little bit harder when I'm looking at things close up, and because of that I'm going to be using some glasses when looking at things close up, mainly just the computer. But because I've been dealing with eye strain the last couple of weeks, I haven't been able to make the art critique video, so that's why it's a little late. And my glasses should be coming sometime this week. You may actually never see me really wearing them though, because I don't really like how I look with glasses. So I think what I might do is just use them most of the time on the computer, but then when I'm filming, maybe I'll take them off. But then as long as I'm wearing them most of the time, then my eyes shouldn't be strained. But I'll just have to do whatever works best. So I'm going to throw right up on the screen right here all of the artworks that I'm going to be critiquing. Thank you everyone for sending in your artwork. I'm not able to critique all the artworks, sometimes there's just some artworks that I don't really know how to critique. So I'm not able to critique all of the artworks, but thank you everyone for sending in your artwork. Alright, and this first artwork comes from a Cash B. So they said, this is my first sci-fi art, which I took inspiration from the sci-fi quarter you made. I just wanted to know how I can improve this artwork. Thank you. So this is a really cool sci-fi artwork, and especially for being your first one, this is really cool. Sci-fi artwork can definitely be pretty challenging to make it look cool, but this definitely looks really cool. There are a lot of things I really like about this artwork. I like these little tubes right here. This is really cool. And I like that ground sci-fi stuff that you added there, the little plates. I don't know if you modeled that or if it's a texture, but it does look really awesome. And you added like a sci-fi door over here. That's really cool. And some cool blue lights. And you got like these sci-fi panels here, or maybe some touch screens or something. And it looks like there's also some like cyborg creature here in this like tube of liquid. And I also really like the kind of fog that you added there on the ground. It looks really cool. It gives it a really atmospheric feel to it. Let's go over how I would critique this. So the first thing that I would do is I would add a denoise. I don't know if you added a denoise, maybe you did, maybe you didn't, but if you kind of look like right in here, you can especially see there's a lot of noise. There's a lot of noise right here too, and especially where the reflections of light are, like right here, and kind of like right over here, there's just a lot of noise there, a lot of noise down here. So once you render out your image, if you go into Blender's Compositor and then you add the Denoise node, that'll smooth that all out. The Denoise node in the Compositor works really well. It's my favorite way to denoise the image, so that's what I would recommend doing. Now, I do really like the composition. I think it's pretty cool that there's kind of like the door over here, then there's that little tube there, and then there's like two different kind of tables here. I do like how the composition is, but this table here, this circular table, I don't really know what it is. Like, I don't really know exactly what these kind of pieces are here. This kind of looks like maybe some kind of like robotic arm or something, but I really don't know what it is. It kind of just looks like a cube with like some things extruded out. And this here, I really have no idea what this is. This thing, it kind of looks like some organic creature maybe is living in there, like with some little things stuck on him. And then over here, this looks like maybe a control panel or something, but I just don't really know what this is. So I think maybe it would be a good idea to change it out for something else. I do like the circular table. I think that looks really cool, but I would say figure out some sort of tool or some sort of like communication system or something, and then actually design some kind of object or something on the table which is created for a specific purpose. And then also on your objects, if you could add a bevel, I think that would really help, because it looks super sharp right here. Again, it just kind of looks like a cube that was maybe extruded up, but everything in the real world has some amount of bevel, even if it's just very, very smooth. Everything has some amount of bevel, so if you just added a tiny little bevel on these types of objects, maybe even adding a bevel over here on the table if you didn't add a bevel, I'm not quite sure, but I especially noticed it right here with kind of that blue light reflecting off of there. Just adding a bevel, you could either add the bevel modifier on the object, or you could tab in edit mode, and then you could select the different angles, the sides of the object where you want to add the bevel. You can select those and then press Ctrl B, and that will also add a bevel, or you could just add the bevel modifier. So this is how I would improve this artwork, but this is really cool. I really like the different textures and things that you added. The different details are really cool. And I also really like the blue color that you chose. It really gives it a cool sci-fi feel, like these little blue lights here. And generally, all the different objects have a blue theme to them, like the blue lights here, kind of the blue watery thing here, and then also the blue screens. So I hope this critique was helpful, and thank you for sending in this artwork. Alright, and this next artwork comes from AL7 or AL7, I'm not quite sure how to pronounce that. So they sent in this sculpt here of this face, and they also sent in the reference image that they were using to sculpt the face. And specifically, they wanted critique on likeness and features. So this is pretty good. It's definitely getting pretty close to the reference, but there definitely are some things that I would do to improve this. So the first thing that I would do is actually find more reference images. I don't know if you just use this reference or if you used other references, but it's actually kind of hard to sculpt with just one reference. So if you can find more reference images of the same person you're trying to sculpt, then that would be helpful. Different reference images from different angles, maybe a side view, front view, top view, back view, things like that. Or if you can't find more reference images of the exact same person, you could try to find someone who looks similar and then just kind of get reference images from the side and the front and the top and things like that. And you may have done this as well, but also like getting reference images of just an eye or just an ear or just a mouth or a nose, just getting reference images of the shape and the form of the different features of the face. Now, as far as the sculpt goes, I definitely have some things to critique. So one thing is that it looks like you sculpted it on a plane. It looks like maybe you had like a cube or a plane or something. You can see right over here, it kind of looks like the face is coming out of a flat plane from the back. I'm not quite sure if you did that or not, but that's what it looks like. What I would recommend doing is actually adding like a sphere or an icosphere and then sculpting the face from that, because a face is pretty round, somewhat round, and so that's going to be the closest shape, the closest primitive shape to a head. So instead of sculpting this out of like a flat object, I would suggest adding a sphere and then sculpting the head from that. And then I'll talk about this later. I just drew this on the wrong layer, but I'll talk about that part as well. Now, as far as the eye goes, if I zoom in here, you can kind of see that it looks like the eyes are kind of empty, and then there's just that little circle there, like for the pupil. But eyes are, you know, a nice big circle, and they're in the eye, and then the eyelids go around the eyes. And there's also that white part of the eye, but where the white part of the eye is, it looks like it just kind of cuts back inside the eye. And also the problem with sculpting the eye is that eyes are very, very round and circular. So if you just get a little tiny thing off, then it can kind of mess it up and make it look less realistic. So what I would recommend doing is actually going back into object mode and then adding a sphere object and then adding the mirror modifier to that, and then actually placing that inside the eye socket and then sculpting around it. And that way you'll know that it's going to be a perfectly round eye, and you won't really have to worry about sculpting those kind of details. You could just do a little bit of box modeling, maybe have it go back in just a little bit where the pupils are or something like that. Now, right over here on the mouth, it seems like it kind of got smoothed out right here. You can see right there on his mouth, it's not really like that. If I just get rid of this, you can see like this right over here, that looks pretty good, but then right over here, it just kind of looks a little bit smoothed out. I don't really know what happened here, but I think it'd be kind of good just to kind of sharpen that up, sharpen up those edges there. And then also, I think deepening the creases and adding more creases would really help. So it looks like you added some of them. I can see some of those forms there, but if you look like right here, if I just get rid of this, you can see there's those deep creases right there. Like when someone smiles or something, there's going to be those creases around the mouth. And also you can see like there's creases up here. There's a little bit of crease there because he's kind of like frowning a little bit. If I just turn this on, I kind of drew where some of the creases are. Also, there's a little bit of wrinkles there kind of coming down on his chin and neck. So just sharpening that up. So you can see right here, I just drew where I think it could be added. So just going along there and adding some more creases. Also like the mouth, adding a nice good crease in there. In between the lips, if I just get rid of this, you can see it just kind of looks a little bit soft right here. So if you use the crease brush, you can just go along there and it's going to just sharpen it and crease it down. And that'll be really helpful, especially right here, kind of where the wings of the nose are down to the side of the mouth, really deepening that crease because you can see it pretty strongly right here and right here. And then also, I know I already talked about the eyes, but another thing about the eyes are you can see all of the pupils right here. I just kind of drew around it, but on the reference, his pupils, you can see that because his eyelids are coming down a little bit, you can actually only see half of the pupil. So if I just go like this, you can see I just drew a circle around here and you can only see half of that pupil. Whereas here, if I just kind of put them side by side, you can see the whole pupil. So when you model the sphere object for the eye, just make sure that, you could like model the pupil kind of going back in and then just kind of sculpt the eyelids or just kind of pull them down a little bit so that you can only see half of those pupils. And then the hair could definitely be improved as well. What I did is I just drew some lines here. So if I just kind of get rid of this, you can see that there's kind of that little crease right there where the hair comes out. And if I just turn this back on, you can see the hair kind of comes up around right there. And then also right here, if I just get rid of that again, you can see it kind of comes down slightly and then it kind of goes back and forth. It just kind of rotates around like this in a curve. But right here on your one, it kind of just goes straight over to the left, whereas this one kind of rotates. So just adding that, kind of changing that so that it rotates in the correct way, and then also adding that crease there on the side of his head. Also, when I'm sculpting hair, I prefer to make it a separate object, so I usually just sculpt someone without any hair, and then I add a sphere, kind of stick that on top, and then I make the hair a separate object. I don't think you really have to, but I personally just like it better, so you could do that if you wanted to. And then the last thing was on the ears. So you can see the ear shape if you kind of look right there, and definitely getting reference images of ears kind of on the front and the side would definitely help. But you can see kind of the ear shape there, the earlobe. If you go over here, you can see the earlobe is kind of going a lot more into the head, but with his earlobe, it kind of comes up a little bit before going into the head. So just changing the shape of that and kind of making it more like the reference would really help. And then also, if you zoom right in here, you can see kind of how thin that is. It's kind of thin. And if you go over here, you can see that's actually a lot thicker, that top part of the ear. So just kind of going in there and thinning that out, tightening that top little part of the ear, that would help as well. And also doing it right here on this ear. So you can see that skin right there is pretty thin, but then right here, it kind of looks a lot thicker and a bit lumpier. So just tightening that up would help as well. Also, I personally think that sculpting the neck would give it more likeness, but if you don't want to sculpt the neck, you don't have to. It looks like maybe you sculpted the neck a little bit, but I would probably sculpt all of the neck, and maybe if you even wanted to model the shirt here, you could do that as well. And then one last thing, I think adding some eyebrows would help as well. It looks like maybe you added a little bit of eyebrows. What I would probably do is you could do like some kind of hair particle system, but if you wanted to sculpt it, you could just get a very small brush. Like you could go to the draw brush and then just scale it way down, and then you could kind of just go in there and make a very, very subtle texture, kind of going around there. His eyebrows are a little bit hard to see, but if you just want to go in there and kind of place that, I think that would give a little bit more likeness as well. So that's what I would do to critique this. This is definitely a pretty challenging thing to do. I find that sculpting likeness, like trying to actually make a sculpt look like someone, is pretty challenging to do. So great job on this. Alright, and this next artwork comes from Henrique Carvalho. So they sent in this super awesome architecture scene. It's really photorealistic. I really quite like it. And they have a bunch of different renders here. So I'll just go along here and look at the different renders. Really cool. I like this like fisheye one. And then here's an evening scene, really cool. It's very photorealistic. And then here is kind of looking from the top, kind of close up. And then they also have the same thing, looking from the top, but kind of zooming out a bit to kind of see the entire building. And then they also have a render inside the house. So I really like that modern minimalistic feel. I think that is pretty cool. And this water here is super realistic. It's really quite good. I really love the colors. It looks very fresh and cool and relaxing. And I really like the texture that you added there underneath the water. So this is really awesome work. It's quite photorealistic. I really like it. So you said, I want to work in ArcViz and I'm self-taught. Do you have any critiques, please? And do you think I'm ready? So you said that you wanted to work with ArcViz. I'm not exactly sure if you wanted to work as like a freelancer or maybe you wanted to get into the industry working for a company. I don't actually have very much experience with that. I've only done a few freelance jobs and they were from people who I actually knew in real life. I never really just connected with someone online and did a freelance job for them. But with the skill you have, I definitely think you could do freelance. I just don't really have any experience with going out there trying to find work as a freelancer online. And just like freelancing, I don't really have any experience with like working for a company or working in the industry. I've never had a job in the industry as a 3D artist or working for a company or anything like that. I'm just running my own business online, this YouTube channel mainly. If you're trying to create a portfolio, I definitely think this could go in a portfolio after the few tips that I give you. There's a few things that I think could be improved with this, but overall this is really good. I personally think this would be really great in a portfolio. That's just my opinion. I think this is quite good. So something that I noticed is that some of the textures are actually being tiled, mostly on this image right here. So if I zoom in here, you can see that like that little part right there kind of comes over. The same thing is happening like right here. So it's being tiled right there. And then also if you kind of look up close here, you can kind of see it looks like it's being tiled. You can kind of notice that there's like a little lighter area right here and there's kind of some streaks. Very subtle, but I could notice that tiling there. And then also right up here on this one, it's really subtle, but I did notice a little bit of tiling. You can kind of see there's some like scrapes or cracks or something right there. And then you can see the same thing is right over there. And if you haven't seen this video already on YouTube, I'd highly recommend you watch this. It's called How to Tile a Texture Without Repetition, and it's from Blender Guru. So this is a super awesome tutorial. And in the video, he shows you how to scale up a texture and do some things to it to make it so it's not repetitive. So definitely go watch this video. I'd highly recommend it. But basically what he does is he adds in these special nodes that he's created, and he has a free download. Right here in the description, he has a free download, so you can go download those nodes and then you can import them into Blender, and he'll show you how to do that. But then what you can do is you can actually rotate the textures and rotate the tiling so that it looks more random. So it's really cool. I highly recommend you watch this video from Blender Guru, and if you use his technique, then you'll be able to fix those issues and it won't look as tiled. But this is really subtle, and I only noticed it because I was observing it very closely, and I am a 3D artist as well. Now, another thing that I would definitely do, especially on this evening scene to make it look better, is to just add more samples. So I know that does increase the render time, but especially for like a finished work, especially if you want to like have it in a portfolio or something, I think it should look really nice. Maybe if you could like render your computer overnight if it's taking a long time to render, or just kind of wait it out and let it render. So I would turn up the sampling even more, because you can see there's like some washed out areas. It almost looks like it's smudged, especially in these darker areas. You can kind of see it, and then it does look like you added a denoise, which is really great, but adding that denoise, yeah, I can kind of add that little smudgy bit. So just turning up the samples I think would help. These daylight scenes look pretty good, but I think just like those evening scenes could definitely have some more samples. And then just a few things on this indoor scene. I think you might need to turn the light paths up. I don't know if maybe you turn the light paths down to make it render faster, but it looks like something is going wrong with the light paths. Because you can see here, these shadows, they're very dark and something just kind of looks off. It's very like black. It doesn't look like it's bouncing enough time. So if you go into the render settings, go into the light paths, I think just turning that up a little bit would help. It looks like maybe you just turned it down to save render time. But just turning that up a little bit on this shot would help, I think, because yeah, something just looks a little bit weird here with those shadows. It's very dark. I'm not quite sure, but I think that it was the light paths. And then this is really just my personal preference, but personally, I don't really like this black and white texture here. So it has like these little black areas and then it's mostly white. I personally just don't really like that. I feel like it's very glaring and contrasty. I would probably just use some basic marble texture, maybe a pretty light or white marble texture, but that's just my personal opinion. I just don't really like how contrasty that is. So I would change the texture, but if you like it, you could keep it. And then also, it looks like something is a little bit wrong with the UVs here on the side of the table. So you can see that the UVs don't really match up here. So if you want to go ahead and like re-UV unwrap that and make the table, you know, going down, so the texture actually goes down and then goes down on the table. So it would like go here and then go down. I think that would help because you can see like this black part right here, it just kind of comes up and then it just stops. And like, you know, this black piece right here, it just kind of stops. So if you have that connect, it's going to look more realistic because it's going down along the side of the table. So I would just fix those few things, but really, I think this is super awesome. Personally, I would put it in a portfolio. I think this is really quite good. It's very photorealistic and I really like it. So that's it. I hope these critiques were helpful, and thank you for sending in this artwork. All right, and this next one comes from Kaustiv Dutta, and so they sent in this really cool low poly scene. I actually don't have any critiques. I tried looking for some critiques, but I really don't have any critiques for this, but I wanted to put it in the video because it's just really cool, and so I wanted to show it in the video. I really like the low poly style that you created. These trees look really great. I really like the grass, especially that glow there in the house, really cool. And I just like the colors that you had, like these cool blue and purplish lights, and then these yellow lights down here. Almost gives it like a slight sci-fi feel. But then there's kind of this yellow here mixing with the blue gives a nice purple. So the colors are really cool. I just really like it. It's a super nice scene to look at. I like the modeling. The style of the modeling is very cool. You got some nice water here, like a little pool. And I like how you added some bricks, but you didn't add the bricks all over the place. You're just kind of suggesting that more bricks are there. It gives a really nice feel to it. So I really don't have any critiques. This is really nice work, but I just wanted to have this in the video to show it in the video because I thought people might like to see it. It's a really cool artwork, very inspiring. So I'm sorry that I don't have any critiques, but thank you for sending in this artwork. Alright, so hopefully I'm pronouncing your name right. These next two artworks come from Jawline. And so they sent in this really cool image right here. I really like the contrast of this. It kind of looks like maybe some doors opening, and then there's like this character here. And I really like that the character is black. You can kind of see their silhouette. And then there is the white shine coming off the ground from kind of like that door or that glowing thing in the center of the scene, and then it's kind of black. So I really like that contrast between like the dark ground and then the light reflection and then the dark character. It's a really cool scene. I actually don't really have any critiques for this. I think this is really cool. It is a bit simple, but it is really cool. And then you also sent in the blend file for this other really cool render. So this is really awesome. You did it in Eevee. Very cool. I really like the sci-fi feel to it. The only critique that I have is this ground here. If I look here, you can see that the character, it kind of just looks like he's floating. Looking at the render here, it kind of just looks like he's floating a little bit. And if you look at these like beams right here, they're so big that you'd kind of be like stepping over them. So what I would do is probably just select the ground here, this piece, and then also this piece. I would just take the ground and just scale that on the Z-axis and just scale it way down and flatten it. Just something like that so it's a lot flatter. Maybe even select this and kind of bring it in just a little bit. Bring it down. And then I would just zoom into the character and just kind of bring it up so that the character's actually going on the ground just a little bit. So just something like that. But that's really it. This is a really cool piece and I do really like it. I don't have much critique. It is quite good. So thank you for sending in this artwork. All right, hopefully I'm pronouncing this right. So this next artwork comes from Talhog. And they sent in this really cool character here, and they sent in a few different views, so I'll show you the other views here. Really cool character. I really like the face and the expression. It's a very interesting character. Now, originally the images were actually a little bit darker, and it's a little bit hard for me to see all the details. I have my monitor brightness all the way up. It just seems a little bit dark. So what I did in Krita here is I just turned this on, and it just brightened everything up. So I'm just going to brighten that up for the critique. Now, characters definitely are not my specialty. I'm still learning how to do characters as well, so I don't have a ton of feedback, but I do have a few things to point out. So if you kind of zoom in here, especially at the arm, it kind of looks like this is all one piece, like it's connected to the arm. I'm not quite sure if you did this or not, but it looks like that. If I kind of look in here, you can kind of see it looks like maybe you just crease that. What I would do is I would sculpt the character in like a T pose, so having his arms out like this. And I think that that's just a better workflow when creating characters. So I would make a T pose, just kind of have his arms out like that. And then I would just do some basic rigging. It doesn't have to be very complex, just some very simple rigging. And then I would rotate the arm and kind of put it right down there. And that way you're not actually sculpting like that arm coming out. The arm is actually kind of separate coming out here, and then you would just pose it down there. And then once you've posed it, you could like apply the armature and then do a little bit of sculpting in here, like to sculpt the folds and stuff. But it just looks like, especially like right here and a few other places, like kind of like right there, it looks like his arm is kind of like a part of him and it's just kind of bumping out. So I think it would look more realistic if you made a T pose and then you just posed it. And then I think some of these areas are a little bit lumpy. You can kind of see right here, when you kind of look here, this kind of looks lumpy and it doesn't really look like cloth. What you could try instead is using Blender's cloth simulator. So you could model just basic clothes and then you could turn on the cloth simulation and that might make it look more realistic. But if you wanted to sculpt it, really just kind of making it thinner, because a lot of these pieces look pretty lumpy here, especially this part right here kind of around his neck. It just kind of looks like a lumpy piece. It doesn't really look like cloth, but it has like a cloth texture on it. So just making that less lumpy, really defining that shape. Cloth is pretty thin, so just kind of making it as thin as you can and making a lot of folds and creases as well. And again, it might be better to use the cloth simulator. Something else that you could also do to add like wrinkles is to use that somewhat newer feature. It's the cloth brush in the sculpting tab. If you're using like the newest version, then if you go into Sculpt Mode and you kind of scroll down on the brushes, you should be able to see a cloth brush. And then if you kind of drag it around, it will add wrinkles to the cloth and it actually looks pretty realistic. So that's something else that you could try as well. But this is a really cool character. I really like the hat that you added. Very cool. The little feather there and everything. And I especially like the face. It's really cool. I really like the texture painting that you did on the face. Looks really good. One thing that I might do is add a bit more of a neck, because it kind of looks like his head just ends here. So if you actually kind of sculpted down a neck and then kind of put that collar around the neck, that would help a little bit, because it kind of looks like here, like there should be kind of a neck right there, but there really isn't. But yeah, I really like the texture painting you did on the head there. Really great expression. Also, I can see that you added a rim light, which is really great. Adding that light back there really makes the character feel more 3D and kind of pops it out from the background. So you got a nice rim light right there. Really like that. So really great work, and I hope this critique was helpful. Thank you for sending in this artwork. All right, and next up is this little low poly render here, and this is from Zencast 5. And then as well as this, you also had a Blender file that you sent me. So you said you're following some free tutorials on Udemy, and then there's this still, and then another one is an animation work in progress. And you need my most honest opinions for both. And then you wanted help figuring out how to mirror the arm on the robot in the Blender file that you sent. And then you also wanted help with cutting a hole in the wall. All right, so let's first go over this little low poly shop here. So this is really cool. I like these little low poly like scenes or worlds. They're really cool. So the first thing that I would do is to add the Denoise node in the Compositor. So in Blender's Compositor, after you render out your image, you can go to the Compositor and then you can add the Denoise node, and it really helps. It just smooths out all of this noise here and makes it look a lot nicer. Also, I would add a depth of field, because these little low poly scenes, I think that they look better when you add a depth of field, because it kind of makes them look very small. If you add a strong depth of field, it's kind of like you're kind of looking down and zooming into them. So adding a strong depth of field, kind of making it blurry around the edges, I think would help as well. And then also, I personally think that setting the camera to orthographic really helps to make it look more interesting. So right now the camera is set to perspective, but if you set it to orthographic in the camera settings, it's going to take away a lot of the perspective and make everything look a little bit more flat and small. But I think that adding that on these low poly scenes really helps to give it a cool style. And then also I would add windowsills. So just like you added here on the door, I would add just some windowsills, just some basic windowsills, maybe just with that brown color. I think that would just make it a little bit better. And then I would actually make the roof a different color. So probably I would just kind of do a gray color, maybe like this gray here on the concrete, or maybe just like a slight blue color or something. And I would make it all right here and then over here and just the top of it. So I would just select all of those planes and make them like maybe a slight kind of grayish bluish color. And that way it'll just make the roof kind of pop out from the rest of the house. And then also with these low poly scenes, I think they look pretty cool if the ground is a little bit thicker. So it kind of feels like they're in this little world, maybe like a little floating world, you know, in the scene. So if you want to just extrude that down and kind of make it look like it's just in this little world, you know, that kind of low poly feel, I think that would look really cool. So there we go. That's how I would improve this one. Let's go over to your Blender file. All right, so here we are in the Blender file you sent, and you were just wondering about two different things. So you were wondering how to duplicate the arm and mirror it over. So there's actually a pretty easy way to do that. What I'm gonna do is just box select the whole entire arm, and then I'm gonna press 1 on the numpad, actually 3 on the number pad to look front onto the robot. And then what I'm gonna do is right here, I'm gonna click on this and change this to 3D cursor. That way, instead of this rotating on its median point, it's going to rotate, or it's going to be transformed on the 3D cursor. So that way, if I click on 3D cursor now, instead of it rotating over here, it's now rotating from wherever the 3D cursor is. And that's the same for moving the object and scaling the object as well. So you can see wherever this is, it's going to be moved from the 3D cursor. Now what you can do is you can press Shift C, and Shift C is going to center the 3D cursor to the center of the 3D scene. So now what you can do is, with the arm selected, you can press Shift D and then just click on escape and it'll hop back to where it is. And then I can press S to scale, and then I want to scale it on the Y axis, so I'm going to hit Y, and then I want to scale it all the way over, so I'm going to type in -1, enter. And now you can see it's just mirrored it over to the other side, but it's not actually mirrored it, it's actually copied it over. So now you can see, I need to change this back to median point. Now I can rotate this and it works fine. And then that as well. Now it looks like you didn't quite finish your rigging here. I don't know if you needed any help with the rigging. So what I would do, it looks like you already know how to do it though. What I would do is, any object that is going to already be connected to an object, like there's this piece and then there is the kind of ball piece, I would just merge those together into one object, kind of like you've done here. So this piece and this piece, I would just select this one and then shift select this one. And then I'm selecting this one last because it is the piece that's going to be rotating by. And then I'm going to press Control J and that'll join them together. And then also I need to add the Subsurf Modifier because you added the Subsurf on that. So now that that's one object, you can see if I rotate this, it's going to be rotating on that circle there. So what I could do is just select this, shift select this so that this one is selected last, and then I press Control P and I set parent to object, keep transform. And then if I click on this one, I can rotate it and that looks good. And then if I click on this one, I can rotate that as well. And then if I click on this one, I can rotate that as well. So that's just an easy way to do some like mechanical rigging. And then for the fingers there, you just have to do the same thing. So you would just select the pieces and parent them to the other pieces of the fingers. And then one other thing, when I mirrored this over, something happened here with the thumb. I don't know why this happened, but you could just select the pieces and you could just rotate them over, and there we go. And then when I rotate the robot's body, the arms don't move along with it. So I would just select this, shift select this, and then lastly shift select the body, press Control P and set parent to object, keep transform, and then if I rotate the body, the whole thing will move along with it. I don't really know how you have this set up because it looks like when you rotate the robot's head, the whole thing moves. So you're just gonna have to rig that how you'd like. All right, and then as far as this goes, you were wondering how to cut a hole through this. It seems like you already did that. I'm not quite sure what you have here, but you can see right here, it looks like you added a Boolean. If I just exit the Boolean, then I can tab into edit mode, and it looks like you've already done it. So what I would do is just click right here, and that'll go to the face select, and I'm just gonna select this face, and then I can just delete it, delete faces. And then I can also press 2, and that's going to go to the edge select. And I'm just going to select this edge and then also shift select this edge, and then we'll just delete that. So I'll just press X and delete edges. And then that looks pretty good. What I'll do now is just click on add modifier, and I'm going to add a mirror modifier. And then I need to turn this on to the Y axis. And then if I tab into edit mode, press A to select everything, and then press G, click with my middle mouse and kind of pull that out. You can see what it's doing. So I'll just bring it in. And then once it's kind of inside itself a little bit, I'm going to turn on the clipping right here. And then if I just pull that out, that looks good. And then I'm not quite sure what happened here, but if I alt select this and then press X and delete vertices, there was something there. I don't know what that was, but that looks better. And then if you wanted to like have this very smooth, you could shade this smooth, but you can see when you do that, there are some issues. So how I would fix this is just hold down the Alt key and then hold down the Shift and Alt key and just make sure this whole thing is selected. And then you could just press Control B to add a bevel. Just make a small bevel, and then you could also just press Control R and add a loop cut and just pull that loop cut out there just so that there's a little bit more geometry. And that way when it's shaded smooth, it looks a little bit nicer. And yeah, I would just add the mirror modifier. If you don't want to do that, or if you want to work with the back here, you could just apply the mirror modifier. So just click apply, and now it's just going to be one object. So there we go, that's how I would fix those issues. Hopefully this was helpful. So thank you for sending in this Blender file and the low poly artwork as well. All right, and we have two artworks left to critique, and they're both from Salvatorn. So Salvatorn sent in this really cool artwork here with like this ninja walking through this room. It's got like brick walls and everything. This is really cool. And then they also sent in a blend file with a sculpt, and I'll go over that and show you how I would critique that as well. And you said, lately I've been learning modeling and sculpting, and I'm also working on my personal long-term animation project. Hopefully you can give me some feedback about my render, especially for my sculpt. So overall, this is a really cool render. I really like it. I like how there's this beam right up here, like this beam of wood for the building, and it's kind of like blurred. And then there's this really cool like ninja kind of character. He looks kind of like a ninja. Really awesome character, and the lighting is really cool. I really like the lighting that you picked. Like, you have this nice bright sunlight coming through the window, and the textures are very, very nice, very bright and colorful. Let's go over how I would critique this. So the first thing that I would do is for this brick texture, I would use the displacement map and actually displace the mesh, because bricks really are, you know, bumping out where the bricks are. They kind of pop out, and then where the mortar is in between the bricks, they kind of go back in. So most textures, most brick textures, they're going to have a displacement map. So if you want to go like do a tutorial and learn how to use displacement, I think that would really help. And you could use that displacement map, and then when you render it, it's actually going to make the mesh kind of pop out, and it's going to use the data from the displacement map with the texture. And most brick textures should have a displacement map when you download it, because you can see here it feels pretty flat. I can see that you used like a normal map because it's kind of like very bumpy, and that's good because, you know, brick is pretty rough and bumpy, but it just looks very flat. I can see, you know, the texture here, and you can see where the white parts are, the mortar part, they're kind of at the same place as the brick. So yeah, adding that displacement would really make those bricks pop out and make it look better. Over here, this looks pretty good. This stuff back here, but it's kind of far away and a little bit blurry. So for at least this part, I would say definitely use the displacement map. You could use it for all of the brick, but especially right here. Now, you said you were working on a personal long-term animation project, so I'm guessing that this is probably the animation project that you're doing. So if this is an animation, maybe the camera's moving, that's totally fine. But as far as critiquing this just as a still render, I think that this fills too much of the scene. So this like wooden beam here, it fills too much of the scene. I would say kind of push it back. I do like it being in the scene because it kind of gives more depth, something really close up, and then, you know, kind of the ninja's a little bit farther away. So I do like it, but it almost feels like half of the scene. So I would say just kind of push it back a little bit, move it over, or maybe just bump the camera over a little bit and show more of the room in here. But of course, if this is for an animation, then, you know, maybe you're going to have the camera kind of moving out. So in that case, this wouldn't really be an issue if that's an animation. And then just one more thing, I did notice right over here, something seems to be messed up with the UVs. You can see like there's all these like little straight lines here, and then also like straight lines here. So it looks like you used maybe a wood texture, but yeah, something just looks wrong with it. For an object like this, you could probably just go into edit mode, select everything, and then go U, and then do the Smart UV project. That would probably work fine for something like this. So yeah, just fixing that I think would help as well. But this is really cool. Overall, it's really quite nice. I really like the character, and I really like the textures and the colors and everything that you added. So thank you for sending in this artwork. Now I'll go over and look at your Blender file. So when I opened up your Blender file and just rendered it out, this is what the render looked like. And I do have my monitor brightness turned all the way up, but it is pretty dark. I can't see very much of the sculpt. So I do have some critique for like how I would render this and composite it. So I'll show you how to do that. But then also I'll just show you my critique for how I would sculpt it a little differently. All right, and here we are in the Blender file that you sent. So if I just go into rendered mode, it looks like you have some different colored lights here. That's pretty cool. And then you also have like some fog around your character. And then if I go into rendered mode, maybe just box select that. Yeah, you can see what that's looking like. I'm just going to actually hide all this stuff. So I'm just going to hide these to get them out of the way. And then just zoom into this. You have the X round, so I'm just gonna turn that off. It's really cool. I really like the design that you have here. Yeah, you named it like goat human head. It kind of looks like almost sort of like an orc or a troll, sort of like that, but yeah, it also kind of looks like a goat. But yeah, I really like the shapes that you added. Like you added like the cheekbone there and the nose, and you've got these really interesting like ear things and the neck coming down. Overall, I just really like the shape, so really nice work on this. But if I tab into edit mode, you can see it's actually very, very low quality, and I think that this is really affecting the quality of the sculpt because it's just so low quality. You don't really have the opportunity to add in more detail because there really could be a lot more detail in this. Like there could be, you know, like where the wings of the nose are, that could be creased in. There could be a lot more detail, like the little bump there below your nose, but above your mouth, that little kind of dip there. You could add that in. There's just a lot of stuff that you could add in that because it's just so low detail, you don't really have the opportunity to sculpt all that detail in. Also things like adding in eyelids and stuff. So I'm going to go into sculpt mode and show you how I would improve this. Overall, I really like the shapes. Like it's a really good like base mesh for starting out. But I'll show you how I would improve this. I'm going to show you how I would like change the shapes and stuff, and also show you where I would add more detail to the sculpt. Alright, so I've hopped over to my drawing tablet and I'm just going to start sculpting this. As far as the matte cap goes, I personally like this red one for sculpting. I think it just is a lot better. I'm going to go down here and I'm going to turn on this Dyn Topo, turn that on, open this up. The detailing here, I like to turn this to relative detail, and that way if you zoom in, you can add more detail, and then if you zoom out, there's going to be a little less detail. So I like to do that. And the detail size here, I like to do like 3. If you're sculpting though, and that's kind of laggy for your computer, you could turn that up if the detail's too high. I do need to turn on the Symmetry X. You can see that little dot there. So now when I sculpt, it's going to be doing it on the other side. Also, I'm going to use the Clay Strips brush, and we'll just start. So you can see how low quality this is. When it's not shaded smooth, it's very, very low quality. So I'm going to go ahead and kind of change some of these forms. Overall, I really do like the forms that you have, but there's a few things I don't like this big thing. I don't really know what this is here, so I'm going to kind of fill this in. If I have the detail way higher, you can see that I can go in and sculpt, and immediately I have a lot more detail to work with, and then I can just kind of smooth that out. I'm just going to go along here and kind of give a lot more detail to those forms. So the nose here, just kind of going around, smoothing that out. And then like the nostril, I'm going to sculpt in, just kind of sculpting in there and then smoothing it out a little bit. And then I'm going to go around the form here and just kind of bring that out. Really what I'm trying to do is I'm trying to define those shapes better so that you can really see those shapes, and then and they really stand out. And so this is the wings of the nose, and so I want there to be like a crease behind it. So I'm going to go to the crease brush and just kind of go in here and just kind of crease that. Also kind of going in here. Definitely looking at human face anatomy references can be really helpful. And then also if you wanted to like look at some orc references or some goat reference images, something like that could help as well. So I'm just kind of going along here, adding a lot more geometry because it just really needs more detail. It's so low detail. I just feel like I don't have much to work with. I want to make him maybe look slightly angry. So what I can do is along these eyebrows, I can add in a new form. So you kind of have these forms here, but I can add in like kind of a wrinkle. So if I kind of go like that, it's kind of adding right here, it's adding that wrinkle there. And then right down here on the chin, just kind of going in there, kind of pushing the chin back in before it comes out right here. And then also, I think I want to add a little dimple. So I'm going to go in right here to kind of pop in a dimple and then just kind of pop it out. I don't really like this anatomy, like how it is. I don't really feel like it's realistic to any character. So I'm just going to kind of fill that in and then kind of push this down a little bit. And then again, kind of thinking about human anatomy or the human face anatomy, there's the jaw, and I want to kind of show the jawline, and the jawline starts from like the bottom of the ear and kind of comes down. So I'm assuming this is an ear. It kind of looks like an ear. So I'm going to make that. So I'm going to go down and then over to kind of make that jaw there. We can kind of push that in the bottom of the jaw and then just kind of fill this out a bit more. And then there's usually some creases, especially when you smile. You can see that there's like some creases right there. So I'm going to do that too. So I'm just going to kind of go along here from the wings of the nose all the way down around the mouth. Just kind of go around there and then just smoothing it out a little bit. And I think I'll go back to the crease brush and just kind of crease that a bit. Okay. And then this mouth here, it's pretty flat. Like it doesn't really curve around the face at all. So I'm going to go to the grab brush and make my brush bigger, kind of go up to the top or kind of go to the side or the bottom and just kind of pull that mouth around a little bit so it curves around the face. And then I think it would be cool if there was some sort of like shoulders and neck. So I'm going to go to the grab brush, kind of pull this down. So here's kind of going to be the neck, and then this is going to be like the top of the chest, and these are going to be like the shoulders. And then just like the head, you know, adding in the forms of the neck. So that muscle that goes from the bottom of the ears kind of down, we can add that too. So bring that muscle down there. It's a little bit weird because the neck is kind of coming forward so much. So I'm going to need to play around with this. And then also like adding in the Adam's apple, kind of just adding in that form there. Okay, so I'm going to keep on working with this and then I will show you the result. All right, and this is the result that I got. So I did a few different things. You can see like I added a lot more, you know, human forms, added in like that little dip there, just really defining those shapes because I really want clear shapes. So like even if I go into sculpting again, I took the crease brush and like crease that out. So if you crease, it's going to go in, but then if you hold down the control key as you crease, it's going to kind of pop that out. So instead of creasing it in, it's going to crease it out. Doing things like that, like around the nose and then creasing this in here, you can see everything just has more detail, which totally helps. And then I gave the shoulders a little bit of buffness to kind of make him look like he's like this big, strong character. I could go ahead and do even more with this, but I don't want to get super detailed. But like I could like add little creases, little like wrinkles and things, maybe little scratches and stuff on his skin. And then also where the placement of those horns were, I felt like they were a little bit small and kind of in the center. So I actually just removed those horns in Sculpt Mode. And then I actually just added a new object. I just added a circle and I just box modeled these and then added a subsurf onto them. And then I just stuck those horns onto the top of his head and then added a mirror modifier to mirror that over. So the horns are now a lot bigger. He kind of looks like maybe this buff character, you know? And also just adding more details, like adding in those eyelids. You can see I just sculpted those eyelids there and really sharpening those forms. So I use the crease brush a lot, really just to sharpen those forms and make it very clear what the shape is. So sharpening that up there. I also did pull the eyes apart a little bit, and then I also just scaled them up just a little bit because I thought they could be scaled up a little bit more. You know, giving like the cheekbone here that kind of comes over and like those extra forms in the ear. I could add more into the ear. The ear is more detailed than this. But yeah, I just wanted to give a little bit more form to there. I went to the crease brush and then you can go in here and kind of crease back into the ear. Because if you look at ear anatomy, you'll see that it actually goes back in. So just like creasing that in like that. Really just being more clear and bold with the forms that I'm sculpting. Alright, so now that that's done, let's just go over how I would improve the scene overall, like the lighting and the rendering and the compositing. So in your Blender file, the principled volume that you had, it was pretty high. So I turned the density down to 0.03 because really the fog is very cool. It's a cool effect, but I think it was just too strong and you really want to be able to see the actual sculpt because that's the main interest of the scene. So I just turned that way down. And then the scene just felt pretty dark overall. So pretty much all the lights, I just turned them up because it just felt pretty dark. But then with just the lights that you had, if I just kind of hide this, maybe just for the time being, So you can see this is the lights that you have. I just turned up the brightness on these just to really give it some more light, and just kind of move them a little bit around because you really want to be able to see all those forms in there and all those shapes. So that's really important. But also, I think having a rim light is really helpful too, because what a rim light will do is it'll really bring the object out from the background, and it'll also help to show the forms a little bit better. So what I did is I just added in some rim lights. You can see right here and right here. So I just added some planes and I just scaled them up and then just added an emission material. And I have 2 of them, and I just have them around these 2 sides and just kind of played around with it until you get that white thing right there. So this might be a little bit too strong. You may not want to turn it up that much. And then of course, turning down the density of the principled volume can really help, just because it felt like you were kind of in a fog and you couldn't really see the character very well. So then as far as the render settings goes, you had your render sample set really high. I think it was like 3,500 or something like that. That's really high, and that's going to take a super long time to render. So I just turned it down to 100. And then the denoising here, I just turned off this. What I prefer to do is to use the Denoise Node in the Compositor. I just find that it actually is a lot faster. When you render it out with the denoising on, it has to like render it and then it has to go back and denoise it. Whereas the Denoise Node in the Compositor, it's super fast. It just works really well. I just use that instead. I don't really use the render denoise right here. I use it in the viewport, but not the render. So I actually turned that off, and then I just set this to 100. And then also if I go over here, I just turned this to 200 just because I wanted to give it a little bit more detail when I rendered it. So let's go ahead and render this now. Okay, so it just finished, and let me just go over to the Compositor just to show you what I've done. So pretty simple here. You can see here is the denoise, so I just added that denoise. Now I see that you added the extra like denoising data here. I actually personally don't really like this because it seems to just take a little bit longer, and I found that it doesn't really help that much. Maybe in some cases it would help. You can totally use that if you want to like plug it into the normal and the albedo. You can totally do that. I just don't really use it because I find that it doesn't help very much. So I just added the denoise right in here, the Compositor and Viewer going into the denoise. And then in your Blender file, this is how you had yours set up, and it does look like you used the Denoise node, but this glare here, you can see if I press M to hide it, you can see that now actually everything gets a little bit lighter. And why this is happening is because this mix here is set to 1. So if you turn this down to 0, 0 is the default, because if I add a glare node and then I change this to fog glow, you can see the mix is here is set to 0. So because you were turning that up, it was making it a little bit darker. You can see there, now I just turned it up to 1 and it made everything darker. So I think that's a problem. So what I do instead, if you want to make the eyes glowing, is instead I just duplicated the glare, and that way it just made it a lot brighter. So you can see over here on my file, I just added 3 glares. If I just Control Shift and click on this, you can see that's what it looks like before, and then I add 1 glare, another glare, and another glare. So I think that's the better way to do it, just because when you turn these mixes up, it's just going to make it darker. You can see if I turn that up to 1, it's gonna kind of mess it up. It really depends on the file, but for this I just found that adding more glares worked better. And then of course denoising that, so I just denoise the image. So here we go, this is the improved sculpt. So after doing all the improved sculpting, doing the lighting and compositing and everything, this is what I came up with. So I definitely think this is improved. So hopefully this helped. I know that when you're starting out sculpting, it can be pretty challenging just to kind of make the shape that you want. Just keep on practicing. Sculpting is pretty challenging at first, but you'll keep on practicing and you'll get better and better. Alright, so that's going to be it for this art critique video. Thank you all for watching, and I hope that the critiques were helpful. And again, if you'd like to be in the next art critique video, I make art critique videos once a month. So the best time to submit your artwork is at the end of the month. So like the last couple of days, you can submit your artwork through the Google form. The link is in the description. And then at the first of every month, I look through all the artworks and I decide which ones I'm going to critique. And then I make the critique video as soon as I can. Hopefully this helped you guys to improve your artwork. So thank you for watching, and I will see you in a future video.